Man, 2022 was a weird year for games. It is one of the most uneven years I can recall as far as the pace in which new games were coming out. There were a few months like February and October that were filled to the brim with new things to play, and then in months like April or May, it was like watching a tumbleweed blow over an abandoned street. That being said, looking back, it still turned out to be an absolutely stacked year as far as quality releases are concerned. So let's take a look at my 10 favorites. It takes a special kind of hook to get me interested in a town-building, resource management game. Cult of the Lamb has one such hook. The game's dark comedy and charming art style, and the general setup of being a lamb in charge of a cult, come together in a manner that was far too amusing for me to pass up. The game is split between two general gameplay loops, essentially being one part roguelike and one part town management simulator. The gameplay synergizes with itself pretty nicely. Doing things back in the commune makes members of your cult happy, and you get bonuses to carry into the dungeons. And then while you are in the dungeons, it's an opportunity to collect resources to bring back to the settlement. The combat in the dungeon crawling segments is not the most in-depth thing in the world, but it's varied and good enough to keep you on your toes while you do it. And then going and doing the town management stuff after a dungeon run was a nice change of pace, and the game never felt like it was becoming too overwhelming, trying to manage all of the goings-on of the flock. The stellar gameplay loop was nicely contextualized by the game's absurd and surreal tone to make it one of the silliest and most memorable adventures I went on this year. Neon White was one of many games this year to absolutely nail what it was going for at a gameplay level. It is essentially a speedrunning platformer with some first-person shooting mixed in. Your goal is to kill all of the enemies in a given level and then race to the end as fast as possible. The gun, or rather gun cards, that you pick up will aid you in not only killing the demons in the level, but also each one provides a unique movement ability when you discard them. The yellow pistol does a vertical jump, the green submachine gun will do a really fast downward stomp, the blue rifle does an air dash, and so on. The movement in the game felt excellent, and the shooting never felt at odds with the platforming. In fact, part of the reason the game works so well is because of how fine-tuned the level design is. Every set of enemies is in some kind of cluster that works really well with the flow when you approach at some kind of fast pace. Once you learn where everything is, the rhythm of shooting while on the move becomes a fluid and natural thing. Neon White is also really good at encouraging you to get better at it. The game does a good job at spacing the requirements for the rankings of the levels in a manner that feels like the next one would be completely attainable if you just try again. I usually would not move on from a level if I did not at least gold medal it. And then at the end of the game, all of the mechanics gel together in this really rewarding culmination of everything you'd been doing up until then. Not bad for a dead guy. So going into Horizon Forbidden West, the thing I had a mild amount of trepidation about was if the world of Horizon would lose its allure after the first game answered the mystery of what happened to the world that used to be. Thankfully, that trepidation was unfounded. Forbidden West managed to build upon the foundation that Zero Dawn laid in stellar fashion. I think the easiest thing to point to here is the Tenakth, who are one of the new tribes introduced in this game and one of the centerpieces of the plot. I found this culture to be substantially more fleshed out and interesting than any of the groups that we met in the first game. As far as the gameplay is concerned, the bow and arrow combat still feels great. Additions such as the glider and grappling hook make getting around the world much smoother. The machine lineup in this game is hit and miss. At certain points in time, it felt like the enemy variety was much more quantity over quality, as there were a few of the new enemies that just annoyed me every time they showed up. In retrospect, it feels like the story of this game suffers a bit from the middle of the trilogy effect. But the journey was a lot of fun in the moment, and I rather enjoy the new characters introduced in this game. Kotallo was a standout favorite of mine, and when it comes to delivering on the big main quest story beats, I really liked almost all of those. There was one towards the end in particular that I found immensely satisfying. I cannot wait to see how they top it in Horizon 3. Now here's to hoping that Horizon 3 doesn't release right next to the biggest game to come out in that given year. Xenoblade 3 is easily my favorite of the series. For starters, the combat in this game does not feel like I'm swimming through molasses with ankle weights on, so that's a big step up for me. Having 6, sometimes 7 party members all on the field at once typically means that regular enemy encounters are short and sweet. The addition of the class system also added a fun bit of variety to the progression. I never felt like I needed a certain class to be able to get by, but they were always there for me to work towards unlocking when I felt like I could use a shakeup. Which was fun because sometimes I would play with a balanced party, and other times I ran 7 gunslingers because healing is for cowards. As far as the story is concerned, the game sets up its world with such an enticing sense of melancholy. 2 sides fighting a war that doesn't end and seemingly has no point beyond merely fighting to survive. And while it doesn't take long for the story to veer into a bit of a different direction as you progress, that sense of melancholy hangs over the story for the duration of the game. The main party being introduced right at the start of the game also helps avoid a situation where certain party members only matter for their section of the story and then are promptly forgotten about. Everyone in the group gets a solid arc and plenty of chances to shine consistently. The only aspect of the story I wasn't too hot on were the villains, but hey, not everyone can be Jin and Malos, and the rest of the game makes up for it in spades. I played and thoroughly enjoyed the first River City Girls game a few months prior to the release of the sequel. This led to River City Girls 2 becoming one of my more anticipated games towards the later part of the year, and oh doctor, I had a good time. Compared to the first game, River City Girls 2 is much more dense with its activities. The zones are larger, and even the locations that you revisit from the first game felt like you're seeing more of them this time around. The level design in general also had a lot more going on as far as the environmental hazards were concerned. It did a solid job of making River City feel like a more lived-in location. On top of that, there were more side missions and more characters to try out. All 6 playable characters fight within the same control scheme, but they all have properties that make them feel like they handle just differently enough to be distinct. One might have slower, harder hits, one might combo better, and one might be better in the air. And while the gameplay is great, the thing about River City Girls that won me over is its personality and style. The game nails the sort of thing that I always say good hack-and-slash games do. That is to say, have endearing protagonists and construct a story that puts them in fun situations. It certainly helps that everything about the presentation of the game is top-notch. From the excellent pixel artwork in the gameplay, to the striking character designs and other cool shifts in art style, to the voice performances and lovely soundtrack that just acts as the cherry on the personality cake of River City Girls. I think one of the nicest things I can say about River City Girls is that it has made me way more interested in other games like it now. Outside of playing like Castle Crashers and maybe dabbling with a few other retro 2D beat-em-ups, it's never really been a genre that I've sunk my teeth into. But through sheer force of personality and style, River City Girls caught my attention and might even entice me to try out many more games like it while I wait for River City Girls 3. Man, Sifu is such a cool game. It's another of many this year to just nail what it was going for at the gameplay level. The combat in the game is immensely satisfying, being a free-flowing system with visually gratifying attack animations and really satisfying counters and takedowns to pull off. The learning curve of the game is just as pleasing as the moment-to-moment combat. Doing decently on a first pass through a level to then go back and do spectacularly when you feel like you know what you're doing is a great feeling. I haven't even mentioned the standout mechanic of the game yet, the aging life system that they have, which is certainly unique. Anytime you die and want to get back up, it adds a number onto a death counter, and you are subsequently aged the corresponding number of years. So you age 1 year when you die the first time, 3 years the next, and so on. The way they make it work with your progression through the levels is rather slick as well. The presentation of Sifu does so much to elevate it. The music in this game has been one of my favorite soundtracks all year. That opening title theme, the club theme, and the theme in the first level are all big standouts to me. On the visual side of things, oh doctor, that art style is impeccable. This is certainly a game where the phrase "every frame is a painting" applies. Specifically, nearly like every room in level 3 is just so cool looking. On top of the art itself, the framing of the action in the game is also really well handled. The opening title sequence after the introduction was really cool, and this part in the first level where it transitions from the over-the-shoulder camera to this pulled-back side shot was just perfect for the situation. There are some minor annoyances present in Sifu, but they don't even come close to hindering my enjoyment of the game. The presentation is excellent and it's backed up by rock-solid gameplay that is fun in the moment, and most importantly for a game like this, fun to be good at. Rollerdrome became one of my most anticipated games of this past summer once I saw its initial reveal. At a conceptual level, this game just speaks to me. Mixing a skating game with a fast action shooter is a really neat idea, and they pulled it off quite nicely. The game feels great to control, and the respective elements complement each other really well. The shooting only requires you to aim in the general direction of enemies rather than anything precise, which is a great call because that makes sure that you're always on the move. There's a slow motion button that can help you direct your aiming a little better. There's also a dodge that when done perfectly can trigger a super slow motion state. Doing tricks is how you replenish your ammo, so once you get into the rhythm of shooting down a couple of foes and then transitioning into hitting a jump off of a ramp or grinding on a rail, the arena you are in becomes a playground and your combos become endless. The visual language in Rollerdrome goes a long way in conveying the information to the player in a manner that is easy to understand. For example, the sniper enemies have a laser sight that will constantly be trained on you, but just before they shoot, it changes from red to white. That's the window for the perfect dodge. Later on in the game, there's another enemy that shoots at you from a distance, but their targeting color is blue. And when they shoot you, it's a continuous stream of blue fire. It still has the same color change to indicate the dodge window, but you also know not to hang around because the attack is not one and done and the color is different. This goes for all of the enemies. Like most obstacles in the game have some kind of color specific to them. That way you'll know what you're dealing with by simply looking in their general direction. This game had a surprising amount of story and world building to it. Don't mistake me, it's not a boatload of plot segments, and all of these segments can be skipped by just walking out to the ring straight away, but I was really only expecting the typical back-of-the-box information. You are Kara Hassan, a rookie in the Rollerdrome competition, and you are trying to become the new champion. But there's a bit more to it than that. The game is super economical with how it delivers this information as well, like none of these little plot breaks take more than 5 minutes to explore. And they manage to characterize not only the people you are competing against, like the shockingly down-to-earth returning champion and the bitter perpetual silver medalist, but it also gives you an idea of what this world's society is like as far as how a blood sport like the Rollerdrome came to be, and it has some interesting things to say about entertainment, escalation, and how making more money off of something will always create a conflict of interest. I think the best thing I can say for Rollerdrome is that after beating it, it has become one of those games like Tetris for me, where I'll just turn on some music and let the day melt away. There is so much fun to be had in this game, and it achieves it all with style. It will only be a matter of time before I skate back into the arena. I ended up enjoying A Plague Tale Requiem so much more than I was expecting to. I liked the first one well enough, and from what I saw in the trailers for this one, I expected that Requiem would be better, but holy smokes, not by this much of a margin. Much like Plague Tale Innocence, it is a narrative-driven game with the gameplay being mostly stealth and some environmental puzzle solving thrown in as well. The game does a good job of taking off the training wheels early. There is a brief tutorial segment in the first chapter, but once you really get into the action, it puts you in scenarios that have a level of intensity that the first game did not reach until the midway point. They refined all of the alchemic stuff you are throwing in a manner that I feel gels better with the rest of the game this time around. They also introduce some new tools for Amicia to use. You can pick up knives now that function as insta-kills on most enemies, as well as an emergency get-out-of-jail-free card when an enemy finds you and is about to kill you. The other addition is the crossbow, which also kills most enemies in a single shot, and opens up some possibilities in the environmental puzzle solving once you get it. These improvements to the gameplay were backed up by a story that I ended up really enjoying. The story picks up around 6 months after the first game, with Amicia and the crew still searching for a way to cure Hugo of the macula. Shortly after the story starts, hijinks ensue and Hugo's condition is exasperated, thus ratcheting up the level of the stakes from the start. The game nails the dynamic and progression of Amicia and Hugo this time. Amicia starts the game still pretty shaken up from all that she had been through in the first game, but once disaster strikes again, it does not take long for her to enter survival mode once more. The problem, however, becomes that all of this continued fighting begins to take a noticeable toll on her psyche, as before long she goes from killing soldiers in self-defense to becoming way too comfortable with the idea of putting a rock between someone's eyes. In turn, this begins affecting Hugo in a way that makes him much more violent as the game progresses. The two of them would do anything for each other, including killing or dying for one another, and the game does not shy away from showing how unhealthy that tunnel vision can be. Requiem was also much better at getting me invested in the side characters this time around. I rather liked the characters like Arno and Sophia, and always found myself rooting for them to survive the big dangerous set-piece moments. The music in this game is fantastic. There's a lot of really cool work with leitmotif here, especially when it comes to using the main theme from the first game and a bunch of other pieces in this one. There are so many compositions that just elevate the tension. A lot of the soundtrack is string-based, so it conjures up this notion of a rat chewing through a rope. It really fits with the idea of a horde of rats being on your heels during the highest moments of tension. One of my favorite songs was titled No Turning Back, and man, it's so good. There's this really intense build-up that's like 2 minutes long, and then it comes in with the payoff that sounds like it's straight out of an Apocalyptica song. I've been listening to it with a great amount of frequency ever since I beat the game. At the end of the day, A Plague Tale Requiem succeeds at what it's trying to do immaculately. The gameplay is a healthy improvement from the first, and it manages to tell a compelling story about messy and flawed people trying to carve out a better life for themselves in a world that is relentlessly brutal. I think God of War Ragnarok is my favorite game in the pantheon of recent PlayStation Studios games, at least as far as the past 5 or 6 years goes. It's an excellent follow-up to the 2018 game, and does a great job at building on the foundations that previous game set in both gameplay and a writing sense. I feel like the level design is more varied and the combat encounters boast more enemy variety, as well as more spectacle and a wider variety of things that you can do to tackle any given situation. The interplay of being able to rotate between the Leviathan Axe and the Blades of Chaos from the jump was really nice. I liked that the upgrade trees for the weapons was less like a typical skill tree, and more like it just came in tiers of moves for you to choose from. I also found myself being more enticed to partake in the side activities this time around. There were a bunch of beats at the end of them that I felt like really enriched the main story. The writing in this game is so good. The characters are all a delight to witness play off of each other, and they're backed up by really excellent performances. Even outside of just Kratos, I liked nearly every character in this game. Returning characters that I didn't feel that strongly about in the first game, such as Sindri or Freya, get to shine so much brighter in this game. Even Atreus, who in the first game I would oftentimes think of as just a dumb kid, grows up in a way that makes a lot of sense in this game. He's carrying scenes on his own in a manner that I don't think I was expecting before I played the game. The new characters, such as Thor and Odin, are really great as well. Something about them that I enjoyed in particular is that in comparison to the Greek gods, they felt so much more like actual people. Odin's personality reminded me more of a mob boss at certain points than he did some sort of divine entity. It's hard to really get into more specifics without venturing into spoiler territory, but God of War more than managed to live up to the hype. The gameplay was a big improvement and the story paid off on everything that the 2018 game set up. Whether it was in the form of stunning moments of spectacle or compelling character moments, it comes together to make a package that is one of PlayStation's best games in the past several years. Of all the games that I figured would actually come out this year, AI The Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative was my most anticipated game this year, and boy did it deliver. Much like the first game, it is one of the best mystery games I have ever experienced, and also much like the first game, because of that, it's rather hard to talk about, but I'm gonna try anyway. One thing I can say is that they made the gameplay better. The puzzle solving in the Somniums feels like there's more of an actual logic behind it, rather than the seemingly random trial and error of the first game. And there are more things to do in the investigation segments that break up the pace that go beyond just reading a lot of dialogue. As far as the story goes, this time around it follows Mizuki returning from the first game, as well as newcomer Ryuki trying to solve the half-body serial killings. Much like the victims of these serial killings, the story is split into two sections. One in the present time, and one that is 6 years previous to when the story began, and that is about as much as I'm going to tell you about the setup of the game's story. The story itself did a good job at upping the ante from the first game, while providing a mystery that is equal in quality but completely different in structure. The characters in this game are all really good as well. Mizuki and Ryuki, as well as their respective AI companions, all have really good interplay with each other. Returning favorites like Boss and Date are also great in this game, and the new characters such as Amame, Tokiko, and Komeiji were all utterly fantastic. And everyone was brought to life by some really great voice performances. The story manages to strike this balance where it seems like everyone in the central cast is important for most of the time, rather than just their own segment of the story before they fade into the background. AI The Somnium Files Nirvana Initiative was the most captivating experience I've had with a game this year. Every time I put it down for the night, I spent the whole time I was at work the next day thinking about it and trying to unravel the mystery, and I have continued to think about the journey that it took me on long after I beat it, and I probably won't stop thinking about it anytime soon.